Imagine closing your eyes and letting time slip away, not just a few centuries or even a few millennia, but millions of years into the past. The air is heavier, filled with scents of wild grasses and volcanic soil. Strange animals roam the land, some familiar in shape, others long vanished. And in this world, 2 million years ago, a remarkable species walked the earth. They were not modern humans, like us, yet they were more like us than anything that had come before. This was Homo erectus, the upright human. When scientists tell their story, they often remind us that Homo erectus wasn't just another step on the evolutionary ladder. They were, in many ways, the greatest survivors of our entire human family. Quite literally, the most successful human species in history. While our own species, Homo sapiens, has only existed for about 300,000 years, a brief flicker of time, Homo erectus thrived for nearly 2 million years. That's almost 20 times longer than we have managed so far. Pause for a moment to imagine that stretch of time. 2 million years. It's so vast, our minds can hardly comprehend it. If you stacked human lifetimes, one after another, you would need tens of thousands of generations just to reach the beginning of their story. Compared to them, we are the new children on the evolutionary block. And yet, in their long reign, Homo erectus spread farther, adapted more widely, and endured more changes than any species of human before or since. They walked across 3 continents, through burning savannas and icy plains, through forests that shifted with every ice age. Their story is not just about survival, it is about resilience, about adaptation, about what it means to endure. Tonight, as you drift between wakefulness and sleep, let me take you on that journey. We will explore who they were, what they looked like, how they lived, and why their existence matters to us. Because in many ways, their footsteps shaped the path that eventually led to our own. Scientists call Homo erectus the first true humans in our evolutionary story. Their bodies were built for endurance. Their faces were flatter than their ape-like ancestors, their limbs long and strong, their minds sharper than any before them. They looked like us, they moved like us, and evidence suggests they may have even communicated in ways not so different from how we do today. But don't imagine them as stumbling, primitive beings in caves. Far from it. They crafted sophisticated stone tools, built shelters, and, perhaps most surprisingly, they cared for their elderly and weak. These were not just creatures surviving day to day. They were communities, families, bands of humans supporting each other through firelight, storms, and hunger. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus walked a world alive with danger. Lions larger than any we know today, saber-toothed cats, and towering elephants with tusks curling toward the sky. Yet through all this, they endured, passing knowledge from one generation to the next. And here's the haunting thought. The last Homo erectus walked the earth as recently as 100,000 years ago, which means, for a time, they lived while our own species was just beginning to rise. Imagine that, 2 kinds of humans, sharing the same planet, separated by time yet so close. Did we ever meet? Did our ancestors look into their eyes? That mystery is still unsolved. This is where our story begins. Let the timeline settle around you like a slow tide. Homo erectus first appears about 2 million years ago, and, astonishingly, lingers until roughly 100,000 years ago. For nearly 2 million winters and summers they adapt, migrate, and endure. At their end, in the late twilight of their story, the last known traces come from Gandong on the island of Java in Indonesia, a handful of skull caps, and 2 shin bones, dated to approximately 108 to 117,000 years ago. Imagine those final communities beside warm rivers and monsoon forests, still upright, still capable, still carrying the quiet knowledge of long survival. Now imagine another thread weaving into the same fabric. Homo sapiens, our own lineage, beginning to step outward from Africa. The classic view places early expansions around 90,000 years ago, but discoveries continue to nudge the clock backward. A modern human fossil at Mislia Cave, Israel, dated to roughly 177 to 194,000 years ago, hints that our outward exploration began far earlier than once believed. Two stories, two kinds of humans, moving through shifting climates and widening horizons. Did these stories ever cross? On Java, where Homo erectus made its last stand, the oldest Homo sapiens presence is dated to around 60 to 70,000 years ago, apparently just a little too late for a meeting. Elsewhere, the fossil record is silent on any definitive encounter. No single campfire shared, no tools traded, no bones undeniably mingled. And yet, silence can hold mysteries. A curious clue hums at the edges of this quiet. Head lice. Genetic work suggests human lice fall into two ancient lineages that split about 1.18 million years ago, a time when Homo erectus was thriving long before modern humans appeared. One lice lineage is worldwide and seems to bottleneck near 100,000 years ago, paralleling our species' expansion. The other, once thought largely restricted to the Americas, appears to have remained separate across that entire span of time. If these lineages truly co-evolved with different human hosts, then at some point there must have been transfer, a crossing of bodies close enough for parasites to change address. There's a whisper of contact where bones say nothing. Researchers remain cautious. Without fossils that fix two kinds of humans in one place and time, lice alone can't close the case. Still, in the hush between facts, the possibility lingers. Breathe with the map of their world. Africa's rift valleys, Eurasia's plains and forests, island chains across Southeast Asia. Erectus footprints press into ancient mud in Kenya. Weathered skulls rest in river terraces of Java. Windswept loess and limestone. Caves in China hold their traces. Across these landscapes, climates pulse, wet becoming dry, warmth yielding to chill, then returning. Through it all, upright ones move steadily, learning when to stay, when to follow herds, when to seek shade, when to lift glowing coals and carry fire forward. For now, let the open question remain open. Perhaps our ancestors never met them. Perhaps they did and left only the faintest genetic or parasitic signature. Either way, their long tenure set a sturdy stage for those who came later. In the next hush, we'll follow the first bones that told their name to science and the features of the face that met the wind. Close your eyes and picture the late 19th century. A Dutch anatomist named Eugene Du Bois leaves Europe and sails across seas, determined to uncover what many in his day called the missing link. He believed the islands of Indonesia might hold the key. After years of searching along the Solo River in Java, his persistence was rewarded in 1891. There, at Trinil, Du Bois unearthed fragments that would alter our view of humanity forever. A skullcap with a heavy brow, a receding forehead, and an angled back of the skull. To him, this was no ordinary ape, nor was it quite like modern humans. He called it Pithecanthropus erectus, the upright ape-man. Most scientists of his time were skeptical. They dismissed his find as misinterpreted, perhaps even a curiosity. But Du Bois, patient and stubborn, insisted he had found something more. History would prove him right. Decades later, similar fossils emerged from China, at sites like Zucudian near Beijing in the 1920s and 30s, where entire caves revealed charred bones, tools, and fragments of ancient faces. These were not isolated creatures. They were part of a species that ranged widely across Africa, Asia, and even Europe. Du Bois' lonely skullcap now had companions, an entire lineage known as Homo erectus. What made them stand apart from earlier humans? One of the clearest signs was their brain size. Early Homo erectus skulls show cranial capacities of about 600 to 800 cubic centimeters. Still small compared to ours, yet larger than their predecessors like Homo habilis. But the story doesn't end there. Over hundreds of thousands of years, their brains grew, in some cases reaching volumes of 1,200 cubic centimeters, comparable to modern humans and even to Einstein's own. With bigger brains came new abilities: planning, memory, adaptability. Imagine the challenges they faced: vast droughts, sudden floods, predators at the edge of firelight. To endure, they needed not only strong bodies, but sharper minds. Their brains became engines of resilience. And their faces, too, began to shift towards something we'd recognize in a mirror. They had flatter faces than apes, with forward-projecting noses, an adaptation that may have helped them breathe in dry climates. Their skulls were long and low, with heavy brow ridges arching like stone bridges over their eyes. These ridges were not just cosmetic. Some scientists suggest they acted as natural helmets, absorbing blows in fights or accidents. Fossil skulls show healed fractures, scars of survival that tell us they endured violence yet lived on. Others argue the ridges may have been social signals, a show of strength and dominance in confrontations, like the antlers of deer or the crests of birds. Over time, as communication became more subtle and social bonds more complex, humans lost these heavy ridges, trading raw durability for the ability to read emotions in each other's faces. Their jaws, too, were stronger than ours, broad, thick, with no pointed chin. Their teeth carried patterns of where that hint at their diet: brittle foods, roots, seeds, nuts, but also meat, scavenged or hunted, cut with sharp flakes of stone. A life of chewing, cracking, gnawing, survival etched in enamel. In the glow of fossil evidence, a picture emerges. Not beasts, not yet fully like us, but something in between: upright, enduring, intelligent, and adaptable. In the next part, we'll follow their footprints, pressed deep in ancient mud, which reveal how they walked, how they traveled, and perhaps even how they hunted. Now imagine an ancient riverbank in Kenya, nearly 1 million years ago. The mud is soft after a rain, and a band of Homo erectus moves carefully across it. When they leave, the sun dries the ground, hardening it. Thousands of centuries later, those footprints are discovered, more than 20 of them, preserved like a frozen moment in time. What do the footprints tell us? They show that Homo erectus walked with a modern human gait. Their feet, their stride, even their posture, remarkably similar to ours. The prints are aligned, suggesting a group traveling together. Scientists believe these weren't just wanderers, they were families, bands, communities. In those shallow impressions, we see the first steps toward a kind of life we recognize. Homo erectus had long legs and short arms. Compared to earlier hominins, an adaptation for endurance walking and running. This body plan allowed them to travel across open savannas, forests, and coasts, covering long distances with efficiency. Unlike apes, who swing through trees or walk with bent knees, erectus moved with the rhythm of distance runners. Imagine them moving steadily across miles of open ground, their heads lifted, eyes scanning the horizon. Another clue comes from their shoulders. Fossils show they had a shoulder structure like ours, capable of high-speed, accurate throwing. This might sound like a small detail, but it was revolutionary. With strong shoulders and human-like arms, they could hurl rocks or wooden spears at prey, striking from a distance. For the first time, humans were not limited to scavenging or close-range strikes. They could attack from afar, changing the rules of survival. Their hunting strategies likely combined this ability with persistence. Some anthropologists believe Homo erectus practiced endurance hunting. Picture it. On a hot day in Africa, while antelopes sprint away, Homo erectus simply keeps walking, tracking, following. Step after step, hour after hour, the prey overheats under the sun, while erectus, hairless, sweating, cooling, remains steady. In the end, the animal collapses from exhaustion, and the hunters claim their prize. No claws, no fangs, just patience, endurance, and the human gift of persistence. And yet, their footprints reveal something more than biology. They show variation in size, with larger impressions beside smaller ones. Perhaps males and females, perhaps adults and children. This suggests not just bands of hunters, but communities that included the young. Some may have taught the children how to track, how to recognize footprints, how to follow trails. Others might have carried infants, protected the weak, shared burdens. Fossilized evidence supports this picture of social life. Studies of Erectus. Skulls show healed injuries, broken bones that mended, jaw diseases that didn't kill immediately. These individuals must have been helped, fed, and cared for. They weren't abandoned. For a species that endured nearly 2 million years, cooperation was as vital as strong legs or sharp tools. Step by step, stride by stride, Homo erectus carved their path into the earth. Their footprints remind us that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about walking together. In the next part, we'll explore how these upright humans adapted their bodies in another remarkable way. By shedding their fur, embracing sweat, and changing skin itself, an adaptation that may have shaped the very course of human evolution. Picture the African sun hanging heavy in the sky. The air shimmers with heat, grasses ripple like waves, and herds of antelopes scatter at the scent of predators. In this unforgiving landscape, one species found a remarkable way to endure. Homo erectus began to lose its fur. Most mammals are covered with dense hair or fur for protection. It shields against cold, scratches, parasites, and even the burning rays of the sun. Yet Homo erectus, around 1.2 million years ago, followed a different path. Their bodies grew largely hairless, and in exchange, they developed a far more powerful cooling system, sweat. This may sound like a small change, but it reshaped human evolution. With fur gone, sweat glands multiplied across the body. Imagine a Homo erectus hunter moving under the blazing savanna sun, skin glistening, every bead of sweat carrying away heat. While antelope panted and predators rested in shade, Erectus could keep walking, keep running, keep pursuing. This gave them an extraordinary edge in survival. Scientists believe this adaptation went hand in hand with another crucial change: brain growth. The human brain is an organ that overheats easily. With better cooling, Homo erectus could support larger, more energy-hungry brains without collapsing in the heat. In a sense, every drop of sweat carried away not just heat but opened the door for greater intelligence. But losing fur created new risks too. Without a natural shield, their skin was exposed to the fierce African sun. The answer lay in pigmentation. Around the same time they lost fur, genetic evidence shows Homo erectus developed dark skin. Melanin, the pigment responsible for darker tones, acted as a natural sunscreen, absorbing ultraviolet rays and protecting against cancers or deadly burns. It was nature's perfect balance. Bare skin paired with a protective cloak of color. As they spread beyond Africa, however, different challenges awaited. Populations that moved north into cooler, cloudier regions faced less sunlight. Too much pigmentation in those places could block vitamin D production, vital for bone health. And so, just as we see in humans today, Homo erectus likely exhibited a range of skin tones depending on their environment. Light or dark, their skin was never just about appearance, it was survival written on the body. There is another clue about their biology, hidden in the skull of a young child found in Java, known as Mojicerto 1. This infant, just 1 year old at death, already had up to 84% of adult brain size. In modern humans, a 1-year-old typically has only about half. This tells us Homo erectus grew faster with shorter childhoods. Their young became independent sooner, a trade-off that meant less prolonged care, but perhaps more children over a lifetime. They may not have had the extended, imaginative childhoods that modern humans enjoy, but they were resilient. Their brains, though faster in growth, were still advanced for their time, allowing them to solve problems, plan hunts, and create tools. Hairless bodies, sweating skin, pigmented protection, and rapidly growing brains, these were not random quirks. They were the building blocks of endurance, the keys that unlocked survival for nearly 2 million years. In the next part, we'll step deeper into their world of tools and technology, and discover how stone in their hands became more than stone. It became a symbol of human ingenuity. Now imagine a hand, calloused, steady, belonging to Homo erectus, holding a rough stone. With a sharp strike against another rock, a flake falls away, revealing an edge. What was once an ordinary pebble becomes something more, a tool. The earliest Homo erectus tools were simple choppers, flakes struck from cores. Crude, yes, but effective for cutting meat, cracking bones, or slicing roots. Yet over time, their tools grew more refined, shaped not by accident but by intention. Around 1.7 million years ago, a new technology appeared, the Acheulean hand axe. These hand axes were elegant, symmetrical, teardrop-shaped stones chipped on both sides. They weren't just functional, they show planning, patience, and even a sense of design. To craft one, an Erectus toolmaker first selected the right stone, then carefully struck flakes in a sequence, turning it in hand, shaping edges, thinning surfaces. The process required not only strength but foresight. The final product could cut, chop, scrape, and pierce, an all-purpose tool that endured for over 1 million years with little change. Some archaeologists say the Acheulean axe was the Swiss army knife of prehistory. Its persistence, across continents found in Africa, Europe, and Asia, suggests knowledge was shared across vast distances. How did these ideas spread? Perhaps groups learned by watching each other. Perhaps young ones sat at the feet of elders, imitating their strikes, absorbing skills without words. But Homo erectus wasn't limited to stone. At sites in Java, scientists have found tools made from shells, some engraved with zigzag patterns, the earliest hints of artistic expression. Elsewhere, spherical stones may have been used as bolas, weapons thrown to entangle prey. The variety shows imagination. They weren't merely copying the past, they were experimenting. And tools were not just for hunting. They helped process plants, butcher large animals, and even shape shelters. At Terra Amida in France, archaeologists discovered traces of oval huts, some nearly 15 meters long. Branches may have been leaned together, floors lined with stone or animal hides, hearths glowing at the center. Here we see a glimpse of home, protection against the wind, a circle of firelight where families gathered. The presence of hearths is especially striking. Evidence from places like Gesher Banat Yaakov in Israel, nearly 800,000 years old, shows repeated use of fire pits. Fire was warmth in cold nights, safety against predators, and perhaps the heart of early social life. Around flames, Homo erectus could cook meat, softening it for easier chewing. Cooked food meant more nutrition, less energy spent on digestion, more energy freed for the brain. But maybe the fire offered something else too, something we still know today. Imagine night falling, predators prowling in the dark. In the circle of firelight, fear recedes, and voices, whatever form they took, fill the air. Perhaps they shared stories, taught skills, or simply sat together in silence, watching sparks rise to the stars. In these simple tools and glowing fires, we see not just survival but the birth of culture, the earliest hints of the human way of life we still recognize. In the next part, we'll explore the darker side of survival. Predators, dangers, and the constant balance between hunter and hunted. The world of Homo erectus was never gentle. For every fire that kept them safe, there were nights when the darkness pressed close and eyes glimmered from the treeline. Ancient predators, creatures larger, fiercer, and more relentless than most we know today, shared the same landscapes. Survival was never guaranteed. At fossil sites in China, nearly two-thirds of Homo erectus bones show marks of predator teeth. One skull from Longitian bears puncture holes that fit perfectly with the jaws of a giant, now extinct hyena. Imagine the scene. A hunting band returns too late, the smell of blood carried on the wind, only to find a comrade dragged into the shadows, claimed by fangs. In other caves, skeletal remains of Erectus are scattered across wide areas, chewed, cracked, gnawed. To the carnivores of the Ice Age, Homo erectus was not the master of the land, he was prey. Hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and even crocodiles could take them. Danger was constant, and vigilance was as vital as tools or fire. Yet Erectus was not helpless. Their cooperation gave them strength. They hunted in groups, defended each other, and sometimes turned the tables on predators. At Alergsele in Kenya, scientists uncovered thousands of stone tools alongside butchered animal remains. Among them were elephant bones, cut and shattered by hand axes. To bring down such a giant, groups of Erectus must have coordinated, surrounding, striking, wearing the beast down until it fell. But this world of tooth and claw left more than bones behind. It shaped their minds. The need to watch, to listen, to anticipate danger may have sharpened their awareness. Fire helped, but it was not always with them. In open plains, far from caves, they relied on each other's eyes and voices. The survival of one depended on the alertness of many. Even children had roles. Small hands could gather insects, roots, or eggs. They learned early to notice tracks, to hear rustles in the grass. Their education was not in words but in survival, passed on through action and example. A wrong step could mean becoming prey. A right step could mean finding food or water. Every day was a lesson. And then there was competition, not just with animals but with other humans. Fossil skulls from India and China show fractures, some healed, others fatal. Blows from stones, clubs, or fists suggest conflict, perhaps over mates, hunting grounds, or simple survival. Their heavy brow ridges may even have been evolutionary shields against such violence, dispersing the impact of strikes. In this balance of danger and endurance, Homo erectus learned to live with fear but not be consumed by it. They adapted, persisted, and carved out 2 million years of survival. In the next part, we'll move from the shadows of predators to the spark of creativity. How Homo erectus not only fought to survive but also began to express themselves in early art and symbols that hinted at something beyond survival. Now let us shift from the harshness of predators to something more delicate, signs that Homo erectus was beginning to see the world with more than just survival in mind. Not only hunters and toolmakers, they may also have been the first artists in human history. On the island of Java, a fossilized shell bears an engraving. A zigzag pattern, deliberate, sharp, purposeful. Dating to nearly 430,000 years ago, this is considered one of the oldest known carvings by any human species. It isn't a tool, not a weapon, not something to cook with. It's a mark, a symbol. Was it art? Was it identity? Was it ritual? We cannot be sure, but it suggests that Homo erectus had begun to think in abstract ways. Other discoveries add to the mystery. In Morocco and Spain, researchers found stones shaped and altered to resemble human forms, figurines that may be early precursors to symbolic representation. Some even carried traces of red ochre, a pigment often linked to ritual or decoration. Ochre was heated, scraped, and stored, perhaps to mark bodies, perhaps to decorate tools, or perhaps simply because its color fascinated them. In those pigments and patterns lies a spark of aesthetic curiosity. But creativity for Homo erectus was not limited to shells and pigments. Their most enduring artistic statement may have been their tools. Acheulean hand axes, symmetrical and carefully crafted, were produced for over 1 million years with astonishing consistency. Some scholars argue they served more than practical functions. A perfectly shaped hand axe could have been a display of skill, perhaps even of status, proof that the maker had patience, strength, and knowledge. Just as birds display feathers or songs, Erectus may have displayed tools. Yet perhaps the most profound artistry of all was fire. Imagine a night on the savannah, the wind carrying the cries of lions. Within a circle of firelight, Homo erectus gathered. Flames flickered. Against stone tools, shadows danced across faces, and sparks rose into the dark sky. Around those flames, voices, whatever form they took, might have told stories, passed warnings, shared dreams. Fire was not just warmth. It was the birth of culture. But art and ritual were not only about beauty. Sometimes they brushed against the darker sides of life. In caves in China, Homo erectus skulls were found separated from bodies, perhaps trophies, perhaps ritual objects. Other bones carried cut marks, suggesting cannibalism. Whether for survival in desperate times or for symbolic purposes, these practices remind us that Erectus lived in a world where the line between necessity and ritual blurred. Still, even if their art was simple, even if their rituals were half-formed, these were not mere animals. They were beginning to see meaning in marks, in colors, in objects. They were beginning to imagine. In the next part, we'll turn to another great mystery. Could Homo erectus speak? Did they have language, words, or only gestures and sounds? What did communication look like nearly 2 million years ago? Close your eyes and listen for a moment. Imagine the murmur of an ancient camp, the crackle of fire, the rustle of grass in the night. Now imagine voices. Were they words or just sounds? Did Homo erectus truly speak, or did they communicate in simpler ways? This is one of the greatest mysteries of our evolution. Some scientists believe Homo erectus had the beginnings of language, while others argue they never advanced beyond grunts, gestures, and facial expressions. The truth, as always, may lie somewhere in between. Their brains were larger than those of earlier humans, capable of memory and planning. To coordinate hunts, to teach toolmaking, to warn of predators, they needed communication more advanced than apes. Simple shouts or gestures may not have been enough. Perhaps they used distinct sounds, a primitive vocabulary, short signals for danger, food, or come. Imagine a leader pointing to the horizon, uttering a sharp call, and the band of hunters knowing instantly what to do. But their anatomy placed limits. The spinal canal in Homo erectus was narrower than ours, meaning fewer nerves controlled the fine muscles of breathing and vocalization. And the FOXP2 gene, often linked to human speech, likely did not exist in its modern form in them. Without it, their ability to produce complex grammar or subtle sounds was probably restricted. Their frontal lobes, the seat of reasoning and imagination in modern humans, were smaller, leaving less room for the kind of abstract thought that language requires. Still, even limited communication can be powerful. Some researchers describe it as a proto-language, not full sentences, but meaningful signals. Think of it like music made of short repeating notes. Simple but enough to carry meaning. For passing on knowledge of stone tool techniques, gestures combined with sound could have been very effective. A teacher strikes stone, makes a sound of approval, then points, showing the learner where to try. Over time, knowledge spreads, generation after generation, without words as we know them. And yet, around firelight, in the hush of night, one wonders, did they hum? Did they chant? Some anthropologists believe rhythmic sound, even before true language, may have existed among them. Music, after all, is one of the oldest human instincts. Perhaps Homo erectus sang not in words but in tones, sounds that soothed children, calmed fear, or bound groups together. Their communication may have been less about vocabulary and more about connection. A hand on the shoulder, a nod toward the horizon, a shared sound in the dark. In those moments, they were already becoming something more than survival machines. They were becoming social beings with shared meaning. If Homo erectus was the Model T Ford of language, basic but revolutionary, then they paved the way for all that came after. From their sounds and signals grew the voices of Neanderthals, and finally the full languages of Homo sapiens. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into their social lives and caregiving, exploring how compassion, support, and cooperation gave them strength for nearly 2 million years. Imagine a world where survival is hard, where every step risks danger, where food must be hunted, gathered, or fought for. In such a world, weakness could mean death. And yet, in the fossil record of Homo erectus, we find something remarkable: signs of care. One skeleton from Dmanisi, Georgia, tells a moving story. The individual had lost nearly all their teeth, their jaw showing signs of severe gum disease. Chewing meat or tough plants would have been impossible. And yet, this person lived for years after losing the ability to eat independently. How? Others must have prepared softer foods, fed them, and ensured they were not abandoned. This is the earliest known evidence of human caregiving. Another case comes from the famous Turkana boy, a Homo erectus youth who lived 5 million years ago in Kenya. He suffered from spinal problems, juvenile disc herniation, that would have caused pain and difficulty walking. Despite these challenges, he grew into adolescence. Again, his survival points to the support of a group. There are more. Fossils reveal bone diseases, injuries, and even deformities, conditions that would have crippled an individual's ability to hunt or travel. Yet these people lived, sometimes for years. This suggests that Homo erectus groups valued more than brute strength. They supported members who could no longer fully contribute. That is not instinct alone, that is compassion. Consider what this means. In the cold nights, someone must have gathered wood for the injured. When food was scarce, someone must have shared. Around the fire, someone must have watched over the weak. These acts carried a cost to the group, yet they chose to bear it. Why? Perhaps because they saw value in elders who held memory of landscapes and seasons. Perhaps because empathy was already part of their nature. Even in their shelters, traces of social life appear. At Bilzingsleben in Germany, archaeologists uncovered circular hut foundations, some with central posts made from elephant tusks. In the middle of these circles, fire pits burned. Imagine families huddled close, food roasting, children listening to lessons past. Without words, these were not isolated creatures, they were communities. Some evidence hints at rituals. Arrangements of stones and bones suggest deliberate patterns, not purely functional. Were they symbolic? Were they the earliest beginnings of ceremony? We cannot be certain, but the possibility lingers that Homo erectus was already capable of seeing meaning beyond survival. And perhaps this is their greatest legacy, not just endurance or adaptation, but the seeds of what we now call humanity. Care, connection, cooperation. They remind us that compassion is ancient, rooted deep in the soil of our evolutionary past. In the next part, we'll turn to the mystery of their disappearance. How a species so successful for nearly 2 million years finally vanished from the Earth. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus endured. Longer than Neanderthals, longer than Homo sapiens so far. They walked through droughts, floods, shifting climates, and the rise and fall of predators. And yet, around 100,000 years ago, their story ends. The question lingers: why did they disappear? The most widely accepted answer is climate change. As the ice ages deepened, habitats shifted dramatically. Grasslands became deserts, woodlands turned into rainforests, and prey animals either vanished or moved elsewhere. Homo erectus, with their relatively conservative toolkits and limited flexibility, may have struggled to adapt to these rapid changes. Unlike Neanderthals, who developed specialized tools and strategies for cold environments, erectus clung to older methods, repeating technologies that had worked for millennia. What once guaranteed survival became a limitation. Another factor was competition. By this time, new human species were emerging. Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and eventually Homo sapiens. These newcomers had sharper tools, more sophisticated communication, and greater adaptability. As they spread, they occupied niches that Homo erectus once held. Imagine erectus bands facing rivals who hunted more efficiently, who crafted weapons of greater precision, who learned faster. Slowly, erectus would have been pushed to the margins. The last refuge of Homo erectus appears to have been the island of Java. Its equatorial climate shielded them from the harsher swings of the Ice Age. Isolated from some of the competition on the mainland, they lingered there long after their kind had vanished elsewhere. For tens of thousands of years, they held on. But even Java changed. Rainforests expanded, replacing open woodlands. Hunting became harder, movement more restricted, and old strategies failed. Some researchers suggest a more unsettling idea. Perhaps Homo erectus lacked the willingness to innovate. At several sites in Southeast Asia, they used local low-quality stone for tools rather than traveling to acquire better material. Was this caution or what we might call laziness? Paleoanthropologists debate this fiercely. To others, it is unfair to judge them by modern standards. They may have simply been locked into cultural traditions that once worked but could not keep pace with change. There is also the possibility that they did not vanish entirely, but instead transformed. Many scientists now argue that Homo erectus gave rise to later human species through branching evolution. In some regions, they may have evolved into Homo heidelbergensis, which in turn gave rise to Neanderthals and Denisovans. In that sense, their legacy lives on not just in memory, but in blood. Extinction, then, might not be the right word. Perhaps we should see Homo erectus as a foundation stone, a species that carried humanity through nearly 2 million years, and then passed the torch. In the next part, we'll explore their adaptability to extreme environments, from high mountains to coastlines, showing how their versatility helped them thrive in places that even modern humans find difficult. Now, let us follow Homo erectus into landscapes where even modern humans would struggle. Their story is not only one of savannas and forests, but of extremes, mountains that touch the clouds, coastlines battered by waves, and islands separated by treacherous seas. Recent discoveries on the Tibetan Plateau suggest that hominins were living at elevations above 4,000 meters as early as 1.6 million years ago. At that time, Homo erectus was the dominant species in East Asia. Imagine standing at such altitude. Thin air, freezing nights, oxygen so scarce that unadapted humans today suffer altitude sickness after just a few days. Yet erectus endured. How? Perhaps they developed physiological adjustments, larger lungs, efficient blood flow, or genetic adaptations later passed on to highland populations. Or perhaps they survived through knowledge, choosing shelter carefully, keeping fires burning, and moving seasonally to safer valleys. But mountains were not their only frontier. Across Southeast Asia, evidence shows that Homo erectus reached islands that were never connected to the mainland, even during Ice Age low sea levels. To reach places like Flores or Timor, they had to cross Wallace's Line, a deep water strait with strong currents. It was no shallow ford. They would have needed rafts or simple boats. If this is true, then Homo erectus was among the first mariners pushing across saltwater barriers long before modern humans dreamed of exploration. The thought is humbling. 2 million years ago, ancient humans may have paddled into open seas, guided by courage, chance, or a vision of land on the horizon. The coastlines offered gifts of their own. Shell middens, fish remains, and tools found near ancient shores suggest they harvested aquatic resources, clams, fish, crustaceans, even sea turtles. These foods, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, may have nourished their growing brains. Some scientists even propose that regular seafood, consumption played a key role in boosting human cognition? If so, Homo erectus' relationship with the sea may have shaped not only their survival but our very capacity to think. And still, inland, they adapted to almost every ecosystem imaginable. In rainforests, they may have relied on tubers, fruit, and small animals. On open plains, they practiced endurance hunting, outlasting prey in the heat. In colder climates, their shelters and fires gave them protection. Everywhere they went, they adjusted not through constant reinvention, but through steady, reliable strategies that worked. Again and again, this versatility is what allowed them to persist for nearly 2 million years. It was not brilliance alone, but resilience. They did not need to conquer every environment instantly. They needed only to endure, to pass knowledge through generations, to adapt slowly but surely. In the next part, we will step into the inner lives of Homo erectus, exploring what their emotions, rituals, and first sparks of symbolic thought might have looked like, and how those ancient stirrings connect to what makes us human today. Close your eyes and imagine sitting beside a Homo erectus campfire. The flames flicker, shadows dance against the walls of a shelter, and a group gathers close: parents, children, elders. We cannot know their words, but the evidence suggests they shared more than warmth. They shared connection. Fossils of injured or disabled individuals, cared for long after they could contribute to hunting, reveal a depth of compassion. This wasn't just instinct. It was deliberate. Someone chose to help, to feed, to protect. In those choices, we glimpse the beginnings of empathy, of bonds deeper than survival. Archaeological sites hint at something more: patterns and arrangements that seem intentional. Stones placed together, bones organized in ways that do not appear random. Were these the seeds of ritual? Perhaps they marked a death, perhaps they honored a hunt, or perhaps they simply found meaning in order and repetition. Whatever the purpose, it suggests that Homo erectus began to see the world not only as it was, but as something that could carry symbolism. We also find hints of aesthetic curiosity. The ochre pigments collected and shaped the zigzag. Engravings on shells, these may have been more than practical acts. Perhaps color fascinated them. Perhaps marking an object gave it power. In these small gestures, they stepped beyond the immediate demands of hunger and safety. They began to wonder, to create, to express. And what of sound? Around fires, did they hum, chant, or sing? Some anthropologists believe rhythm may have preceded language. The steady beat of hands on wood or stone, the rise and fall of voices in unison, could have soothed children, calmed fear, or bound groups together. If so, then music, our oldest language, may have begun with them. Their social structures likely resembled flexible bands, similar to modern hunter-gatherers. Elders would have held knowledge of water sources, plant uses, and animal migrations. Young ones would have learned by watching, imitating, repeating. Survival depended not just on strength, but on memory shared across generations. Even their conflicts carried social meaning. The heavy brow ridges that once absorbed blows in fights may also have been signals of dominance, like the horns of animals. Violence and care lived side by side, just as they do in our own species. What emerges is not a picture of primitive beasts, but of humans in transition. They were not yet us, but they were no longer simply apes. They lived in groups, they cared, they taught, they created marks that outlived them. They began to see beyond the present moment. And perhaps, in the stillness of night, when the fire burned low, they looked at the stars. Without words to describe them, without myths to explain them, they still must have wondered. That spark of curiosity, that reaching beyond survival, may be their truest legacy. In the next part, we'll explore the technological and cognitive breakthroughs of Homo erectus, and how their ability to plan, innovate, and manipulate environments paved the way for modern humanity. Picture the world 2 million years ago. Stone, wood, fire, water, and a mind beginning to bend them all toward purpose. Homo erectus was not only a survivor but an innovator, and the traces they left behind show us a species that was learning to shape both tools and environments with increasing skill. At sites across Africa and Eurasia, archaeologists find not just isolated hand axes but entire workshops where stones were carefully selected, shaped, and reworked. This is planning, not chance. A toolmaker had to envision the finished form before the first strike, remove flakes in sequence, and adjust when the stone resisted. Such craftsmanship suggests spatial reasoning and foresight, abilities once thought exclusive to modern humans. Advanced imaging of fossils and tools from Ghana, Ethiopia, dated to about 1.6 million years ago, reveals even greater sophistication. Some hand axes show precision flaking so fine that archaeologists compare it to an artist's touch. This wasn't survival alone, it was knowledge honed and transmitted, a tradition passed from hands to hands for hundreds of thousands of years. But their ingenuity went beyond stone. Evidence suggests Homo erectus may have begun experimenting with proto-domestication of animals and landscapes. At certain sites, unusual concentrations of specific animal bones appear, not natural accumulations but patterns that hint humans might have shaped habitats to attract prey. Perhaps they cleared vegetation or dug water holes, creating spaces where animals gathered. It wasn't farming, but it was the first faint step toward managing ecosystems rather than simply adapting to them. Consider what that means. The ability to recognize cause and effect over long spans of time. If we do this, then that will happen. That kind of thinking is the seed of agriculture, of cities, of civilization itself. Homo erectus didn't reach those heights, but they planted the first roots. Their cognitive world also carried signs of mental time travel. To hunt with persistence, to craft a hand axe, to maintain fire, they had to imagine the future and act for it. This is what psychologists call autonoetic consciousness, the ability to project oneself forward, to plan beyond the present moment. Fossils of healed injuries tell us they also showed theory of mind, the capacity to understand that others had needs, feelings, or pain. They tended to the injured because they recognized suffering beyond their own. Even their earliest attempts at symbolic thought show glimmers of a mind reaching outward. Pigments collected, shells carved, bones arranged, all suggest curiosity about more than survival. They began to shape meaning, not just stone. Through this combination of technology, planning, and empathy, Homo erectus reshaped what it meant to be human. They were not simply reacting to nature. They were starting to intervene, altering landscapes, influencing animal behavior, and carrying culture across generations. In the next part, we will bring their long story toward its close, reflecting on their disappearance, their legacy, and what their 2-million-year success can teach us about our own uncertain future. As we near the end of this long journey, step back and consider the sheer span of time. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus walked the earth. They saw ice ages come and go, rivers shift their courses, forests turn into deserts and back again. They adapted to mountains, coasts, islands, and plains. They spread farther than any human species before them, leaving footprints on 3 continents. And then, at last, their trail fades. Around 100,000 years ago, the final populations of Homo erectus vanish from the fossil record. Their last stronghold, Java, Indonesia, kept them alive longer than anywhere else, sheltered by its climate and isolation. But even here, the forests grew dense, the environment shifted, and their way of life could no longer hold. Other humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and finally Homo sapiens, spread outward with sharper tools, more complex language, and faster innovation. Slowly, Erectus yielded the world. And yet, to call them extinct feels incomplete. Their legacy is everywhere. They were the first to master fire, reshaping diet, safety, and social life. They were the first to build shelters, to shape landscapes, to walk like us, to run like us. They carried compassion in their bones, caring for the sick and elderly, protecting the vulnerable. They left marks of curiosity in pigments and engravings, hints of imagination beyond survival. Perhaps most profoundly, they pioneered what scientists call the human adaptive niche, the strategy of using culture and technology to buffer against nature's challenges. Earlier species relied only on biology. Erectus used tools, fire, and cooperation. That pattern continues with us today, as we use science and culture to meet threats that biology alone cannot solve. In a very real sense, every tool you touch, every story you tell, every flame that warms you carries the echo of Homo erectus. Their disappearance also carries a warning. Even the most successful species can falter when the world changes faster than they can adapt. For us, climate change and ecological strain loom large, compressing millennia of shifts into decades. Erectus endured for 2 million years, while our own species has seen only 300,000. Their endurance dwarfs ours so far. Will we prove as resilient? And yet, their story is not tragedy. It is inspiration. They remind us that survival is not only about strength or sharpness of mind, but about patience, cooperation, and adaptability. They walked steadily generation after generation, through firelight and darkness, storms and silence. They were not a failed experiment. They were a foundation, a chapter not erased but built upon. So when you strike a match, when you share food, when you care for another, remember, you are living in a world first shaped by them. Homo erectus may be gone, but their spirit walks with us still, in every step we take into the unknown.